I think we're ready to get started. I want to thank you all for joining us this morning for this session on the business of TV everywhere. My name is Justin Hendricks. I'm Executive Director of NYC Media Lab. For those of you who don't know it, it's a consortium of media companies, some of which are represented at the conference today and on the panel, and universities in New York City working together to sort of push forward media and technology innovation around a range of different disciplines. So we work with companies like NBC, like HBO, ESPN, and others, along with universities including Columbia, NYU, Cornell Tech, Parsons, et cetera, on a range of different technology and innovation projects. So I'm excited about this session. The one thing, having participated a bit yesterday and today, that has occurred to me in thinking about this panel is that in some ways, many of the panels that have preceded this one have been about the business of TV everywhere to some extent. So earlier today at the keynote, and certainly the last session, there was quite a lot of discussion about the idea of the business of TV everywhere and different elements of the concept. So hopefully we'll push into new ground here today and make this an interactive conversation. I want all of you to participate, so if you can, have in mind to actively formulate some questions. I would ask the audience, how many of you here work on TV everywhere in some way in your job? Okay, good number of you. How many of you here are responsible for your company's sort of TV everywhere business from a commercial perspective? Okay. And how many of you work on TV everywhere from a technical perspective? Okay. So as we sort of guessed, it's a bit of a split. So this is meant to be the conversation about the kind of commercial aspects of TV everywhere. So we'll try to stay on that side of things to some extent in order to hopefully deliver some value for those of you in the room whose day-to-day job it is not to think about the commercial aspects. And for those of you whose day-to-day job it is, hopefully you'll help us in the discussion by asking super smart questions. So I want to introduce my panel, and I'll start from the end. Alex Bawden, SVP and General Manager of Digital Operations at Scripps Networks. They'll come back around here. Jennifer Perot, Senior Vice President, Business Development, Digital Distribution at NBC Universal, Content Distribution. Michael Fisher, who's Senior Director of Business Development at Sling Media. And then Todd Swidler, who's Global Head of Content Partnerships at Bloomberg Media. And I'm going to let them all sort of say a little bit about their business and what they do in the outset. But I thought I'd start with a sort of simple question. Streaming Media actually hosted this same panel about 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, there was a group of people in this room who were listening to a session on the business of TV everywhere. Maybe some of you were here. Were any of you here for that, by chance? Okay, so it occurred to me that the concept perhaps has changed a little bit in the last bit. So I thought I might start by asking the panel, really, what does TV everywhere mean for you and for your business right now? So maybe I'll start with Jennifer.
So what TV Everywhere means for NBC Universal is a way of really creating extra value for our best subscribers. So those are the folks that sign up for cable and help us pay the bills. And so what it means in terms of our digital strategy is really it's the core of everything that we do. So we've spent a ton of time and money building sort of an infrastructure to support our TV Everywhere apps and sites. And it's really gone sort of from 0 to 60 over the last 12 months or so. So it's really been a key driver in sort of our MVPD renewals over the last 18 months.
And you're measuring that? You can see that?
So it's not measured in terms of a sort of discrete fee in our negotiations, but we do see it as a way to drive the increases overall. And what we spend a lot of time doing is talking to our customers, our MVPD customers, about how to better monetize those platforms, which is a real challenge for the industry.
Okay. Michael?
How would I define TV everywhere?
Yes.
I probably would define it pretty similar to the way most folks would. I think it's end users, customers are paying for content in one way or another, hopefully. I think the way we view TV everywhere is essentially adding value to that end user's experience by allowing them to watch that content they pay for on as many devices as possible. not only when they want, but where they want, right? So giving the ability to for that end user to take that content with them on a plane or take it, at the coffee shop, but allowing that end user whatever device they have, allowing them to consume that content wherever and whenever.
Todd.
Sure. I think in our mind, in my world, to define TV everywhere is a little bit more narrowly than perhaps the broader view. It's really about, to me, it's about that authentication layer and an authentication layer through a satellite or a cable operator or an IPTV delivery, some sort of MVPD, and providing a deeper, richer experience through that authentication layer. At Bloomberg, our focus is primarily in a TV everywhere space through the MVPD application. So it's a multi-channel service that we participate in through our MVPD relationships.
Alex.
A similar story. The goal really for Scripps is to allow our consumers, our fans, to access our content on whatever platform they are, whenever they choose to view that content. We've been doing this in earnest over the past 2 to 3 years. It's been an evolution. I think we're at the point now where things are really taking off. Scripps, particularly, we reach about 76 million households, 76% penetration. So we're making our ways, but there's still a lot of work to do ahead of us in the market.
Okay, so that sort of leads me to my next question, that idea that we're at a point maybe of change in TV everywhere. I went back and read a lot of news articles about the concept of TV everywhere and preparing for this. And one struck me from the Wall Street Journal from 2 years ago in 2012. And the headline was, "Plans for TV Everywhere bogged down in tangled packs." And the article started nearly 3 years after the drive kicked off to make cable programming available online for cable subscribers. The idea of TV Everywhere remains mired in technical holdups, slow deal-making, and disputes over who will control TV customers in the future. It was dubbed TV Everywhere, but for many TV viewers, it has had trouble going anywhere. So that was kind of a dire sort of look at things 2 years ago. What's changed in 2 years? I mean, Todd, are the rights issues still holding us back? What's different now?
I think the rights issues have started to catch up a little bit, and I think the rights issue are sort of core to the reason why this has taken so long to roll out. The life cycle of these deals with the MVPDs tend to be somewhere in the 5 to 7 year range, I would say. And it just takes time for the rights to evolve and sort of catch up to this notion that the living room is not necessarily the only viewing experience. It's through other screens and other devices. And that has slowly started to happen. The term TV Everywhere was coined in 2009, as far as I can tell, through Jeff Bukes at Time Warner. So it's been 5 years, and still the usage is quite low, and the overall industry understanding, I think, is still very early days.
Michael, what's changed from a technical perspective, perhaps, that's allowing the business of TV Everywhere to turn a corner?
Well, I think the way we deliver TV Everywhere is probably different from the general way of delivering TV Everywhere from over the top. But if you talk about some of the challenges, you've got the rights issues and the technical issues. I think what's changed is there is movement on the right side. There is some movement on the technical side. I think the authentication piece is still a challenge. The end user experience is still a challenge. It's sort of a fragmented experience. So I think there's some progress, but there's a long way to go. I think there's also some progress on, speaking more to the business side, is sort of the advertising model, right? So probably leveraging advances from other digital platforms. I think TV Everywhere, and maybe more specifically on demand, is starting to be able to leverage targeted advertising. We're seeing Nielsen and others start to catch up with tracking some of that stuff. So being able to get the right ad in front of the end user and being able to count a view starts to give some credence to the value of TV Everywhere, not only to the end user, obviously, but also back to the programmer. So I think that might help. That has helped. That's just from my perspective.
Jennifer, have we sorted the ad measurement issues? Are we there yet?
No, we're not there yet, but we've made some progress. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, at least at this point. I think for me, what I've seen change, the rights, to the point that both my other panelists mentioned, it's not, you can't just wake up one day and get the rights, right? These are long-term cycles that we have for licensing into content. So until you start, you have to expect, it's another 3 years. If you start the conversation today, the rights might clear up in 3 years. So it's a long cycle. I think the other thing is that, it's back to the commercial deal making. an HBO who was able to move first, I think they're a little less cluttered with kind of a portfolio of content that makes the negotiation a little easier. But when you're in a larger company like an NBC or a Scripps where there's a lot of content in the portfolio, we're not just going out there and giving these rights for not, there's the right time, there's a calculated time that it makes sense to bring those rights to market. So that also is a cyclical thing. And then the last thing I would say is there's just now better awareness. We haven't done a huge marketing effort as an industry because I don't still think there's kind of ubiquitous offerings across the industry, but we've had enough of these tentpole events like Olympics and March Madness where people are starting to understand what it is. So I know there's been a lot of talk about Olympics here today, but what we saw, at least from London to Sochi, we saw success rates. People trying to authenticate and successfully doing it, they jumped by like 50%. That's a really good story. So people are starting to understand what it is, but we still have a lot more work to do as an industry in that space.
And Alex, from your perspective, the deal making still a major issue in the way Scripps approaches
It's not a major issue. I mean, we're progressing just like the rest of my peers here in the panel. It takes time. This started in earnest 2 to 3 years ago, and just as Jennifer mentioned, a portfolio company like ourselves, we have a number of brands. You have to work through each of those brands. You have to work through each of those negotiations with each of the MVPDs, and that just takes time. But the good news is I think we're well on our way, and I think we've gotten past a major milestone. I think a lot of the MVPDs now capture about 80 or so channels in some areas, some a little bit less, some a little bit more. But I think the good news is there's scale and content, right? The next piece is to solve the authentication process, and that's a work in progress, and I imagine that's going to take a little bit of time. But finally, we need to communicate the value to the consumer. And I think that's the next third leg of that wheel, if you will, to really be able to communicate why is this valuable to not only the MVPD but also to the consumer. And there's a lot of value there. There's a quote that a family of 4, when they go out to the movies, they spend approximately $70 to $80, right? That's about the value of what you would spend for a broadband service, cable TV. And so we just need to do a better job of marketing that and actually saying there is value in TV. There is value in TV everywhere, and I think that's the next piece that we all have to manage through.
Are you thinking about the same sort of event-driven opportunities to drive awareness of the offering in the same way that Jennifer is?
Farwell is a little different. Our content is a little different, where we people dial into or turn on the TV to watch our brands, Food Network and HGTV. I think we're a little different from NBCU in terms of the Olympics or ESPN or others in the space. So I think we have a slightly different point of view. The good news is we actually have quite a bit of live viewing. So from an event perspective, approximately 94%, 95% of our viewers actually watch our content live. But again, it's not driven by events. It's driven by the love and affection for our brands.
And Todd, how are you driving authentication? I mean, you similarly don't have that kind of event-driven approach, but
yeah, I mean, I think for us the viewership is on news and on devices where the live event for us ultimately happens all day long. We're covering the news, we're covering the markets, and I think a lot of the viewership we're seeing, not just for our properties but in general, on out-of-home devices is around sports and news, breaking events and things of that nature, and it's events that you want to sort of check in on, not necessarily sit there and lean back for half an hour and watch a full-length show. I think it's primarily the use case right now, particularly outside the home, and there's depending on your environment, obviously. But so we feel pretty good about the content we have in terms of the mix of news that provides breaking news, breaking information, and provides that experience.
Mm-hmm. Michael.
Yeah, I would just add to that we see a lot of viewership on live. We don't. Some of the events are coming. The Oscars are a big event, right? Those are coming. Some of them are breaking, right? News is a huge. One of our biggest viewing days, a sad event, obviously, but the Boston Marathon was one of our biggest view days. Live does drive, right? Live brings eyeballs. I think 75 of the top 100 rated shows on broadcast TV are live, right? So live is very compelling to bring eyeballs. And if there are authentication issues, it compels the customer to work through some of those at that moment.
So it compels the customer to work through, right? What the heck is wrong with authentication? Who wants to take that one?
At a basic level, I think people don't know their passwords all that frequently, and I think there's no sort of universal key that gets you into a lot of these these applications. And so you might have one person in the household who knows the password, and then everyone else in the household is left to text at the last minute, what's my password? How do I get into this thing?
Are we seeing that sort of behavior? Are people developing workarounds? And
I mean, I think there's definitely some credential sharing going on,
Yeah.
and nothing that really kind of makes us nervous. I think we spend a lot of time in these deals. The deals, we license the content, we make it available. It's complicated, but it's not rocket science. But what we really spend a lot of time talking to our partners about is like, okay, what are we going to do now that it's out there to make it easier for the consumer? So things like what we call home-based authentication or in-home kind of auto-detect. So when you have a device in your home and you're on your Wi-Fi network, automatically passing you through. We did that for Olympics. We saw that the MVPDs that deployed that tactic had success rates that were like 40% higher than their peers. So we're really trying to push the industry on things like that, pushing for single sign-on capability at least across our own portfolio, but even better kind of across anybody using Adobe. Easier credential recovery. So when we first started down this path, I remember one of our partners had there were two different, one for bill pay, one for everything else. And to look it up, to remember your password, you needed to know your account number. Well, no one knows that. So now we see, almost everyone deploys where you can put in your social or your phone number. Those are all things that we as an industry, as a company are trying to push the industry on in terms of kind of making it easier. But even with that, you're still going to have a subset of the universe that doesn't understand what it is.
are others on the panel doing new things to kind of help out on the authentication side?
I would just answer from our side. Once
Yeah.
you log in once to our app, and you're essentially able to access all the
You're set.
content, right? And so I think that's one of the challenges, is that you've got this fractured system to deliver multiple providers or multiple content streams. That's where a challenge arises.
Alex, what would you be doing if you could?
Nothing specifically on my end. I think it's really just helping our partners really, provide the data that will be useful to help them better serve our consumers, our joint consumers. I think at the end of the day, you really just want to make it easy for consumers to access the content. You really want them to have it easy recall. But more importantly, you just want it to be something they can learn fairly quickly. I think one of the issues that we've had in the past is that nobody actually knew how to work through this process, right? But once you learn it, it's fairly easy to do. And so, again, this goes back to the communication aspect. How do we communicate this to our audience, collective audience, how to use this platform, educate on how easy it is to use this platform, and then provide the mechanisms so that they don't have to fumble through this over and over again. And I think we're getting there as an industry. It's going to take some time, but we're getting there.
So I read a report this week, that NPD Group released a report saying 25% use TV Everywhere service, have used a TV Everywhere service at least once a month for those pay TV subscribers. Is that a quarter? Does that sound right for you guys in terms of the sort of uptake you're seeing for your not quite?
That sounds high.
Sounds
Actually,
high.
I'm suspect it may be very HBO driven. It sounds high. I would love that
Okay.
number.
So we're still not quite there.
I can speak for us. We see higher than that.
Okay.
We see higher, and we see greater engagement, deeper engagement.
That's great.
But that makes sense because Slingbox, if using your service, they're tied into the idea already.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just help plan this panel again for 2 years hence, and I'm going to get to some audience questions in a second. So I want you guys to start to prepare your questions, please. But if we're going to do this panel again in 2 years' time, what will have changed that's significantly different? Will we see? Michael, when you and I were talking before, you talked about bundling of OTT and TV Everywhere. Perhaps is something we'll see. What are the things that we're going to see come along in the next 2 years, which will change the idea of the business of TV Everywhere?
I just throw out a couple. I think better advertising, right? Better targeted advertising, and that's just across all digital platforms, whether it be Hulu or YouTube or TV Everywhere as an extension of a operator brand or service. I think targeted advertising, trackable, targeted views, that would help a lot.
Mm-hmm. Jennifer?
I think we'll see a lot more deployment across sort of the connected device platform instead of where we've been mostly focused on sort of mobile devices. And I think and you're sitting here as NBC, maybe it's not the best thing to say, but I think we'll see, right now there's a lot of focus on the programmer sites and apps because we have been building and dedicating resources, but I think in 2 years' time, that aggregated experience, the Xfinity app or the Charter app, whatever it happens to be, I think we'll see a shift in the viewing, and we'll be working as an industry to figure out how to engage them more there. And then this programmer sites and apps will become more really for the very deep experience, but kind of aggregated viewing will be at the distributor side.
Measurement, I think, we'll hopefully see a vast improvement in measurement, which will help drive advertising revenue. Just more intel about our audience. So I think that's going to drive, and then, quite frankly, a knowledge and actually recognition of what TV everywhere actually means. And so from a marketing perspective and a measurement perspective, I would imagine it would be vastly improved.
And so Nielsen will solve the problem?
Let's hope.
Todd?
I'm hoping Nielsen solves our problems. I'd like to see a much more consumer-driven approach to the business. There's lots of discussion on educating people and raising awareness, but I think the consumer ultimately has to demand this kind of service. And to do something like that, I think a depth of experience makes more sense. To me, one of the successes around HBO Go has been that it's been previous seasons and deep content and extra material, and there's really been an incentive for users to go out there and take their parents' passwords and log into HBO and try to use that application. So, in a couple years, I think we'll deliver more content on demand. Perhaps alternative feeds, things of that nature that really make it a differentiated experience and drive adoption that way through the consumer.
Okay, I want to get to some questions from the audience. So can I see a raise of hands? Yes, sir.
Do you see TV everywhere as either complementary or competing with OTT content? And if you see it as competitive, how do the two play out in terms of competition? Do you see one being a counterbalance of the other, or are they completely complementary to broadcast? I mean, broadcast everywhere as opposed to OTT.
I'll speak kind of specifically from an NBC side. So we see it as complementary because everything in TV everywhere that we've done so far is really about kind of what's currently on within what we call the network window, kind of current season content. And most of our OTT plays to date have been sort of past season content. And so it's really, for us, it's kind of a windowing game. Granted, those windows are compressing, so we're starting to, those negotiations are getting harder. But right now, I would say complementary.
I would agree. They don't have to be. They could be complementary. You could imagine a day where you're subscribing from some service from a pay TV operator and you're getting some OTT service delivered through them. There's been articles written about this, and I agree in the whole windowing thing. A lot of the over-the-top content is back catalog, past season, and what you're seeing on TV everywhere is more recent catch-up this season. So they're already complementary, and I don't think they have to be separate just because they're separate plays.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would share that view. I think OTT can be a promotional vehicle for the MVPD-driven experience, and that's providing additional content, shorter pieces of content, stuff that ultimately drives the viewing experience for the MVPDs. Makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with my friends and colleagues here on the panel.
So no fear. There's no battle between the two. Yes.
I would say that one could drive the other, right? One discovery of a show in different parts of its life cycle could lead to viewing in another, right? So I could discover something on an OTT provider from 3 seasons ago and then start watching the new version of it, right? So they could be more than just complementary to one another.
Yes, sir.
I'm curious about the panel's view on OTT MVPDs. And are there rights issues? Are there technical issues? I mean, when is it going to happen? Is it good or bad for you? How are you going to deal with it? What do you need to do to get prepared for it? Is it just a bad idea from your standpoint, or what's your view on it specifically?
So I'll start. Our view is that anyone that wants to be an MVPD, we love the dual stream model that an MVPD affords us. So we're happy to talk to them regardless of the way that it's going to be delivered technically. But all the things all the issues you mentioned, are there rights issues? Yes. Are there technical issues? Yes. They all exist. So we've we've built a complicated infrastructure that works a certain way. And we've talked to many people in the space that want to do it. At this point, I would say they've all kind of fallen away because I think everyone thought, gee, if I don't have to build all this infrastructure, it's going to be so much easier and cheaper to get this done. And I think most of them have realized that it's just so complicated, they're having a hard time making it work. So we're still talking to folks in this space. I do think something will happen this year. And we treat them just like we treat anyone else. There was a third thing you asked that I'm forgetting to address.
Is it legally possible?
Yeah.
All your rights?
Yes, I mean, it's not, yes, we have rights issues. It won't be the exact same. There will be programming that will be blacked out. There will be programming that's not available when we do these over-the-top services. And then we'll start the same process like we did for TV Everywhere, and it'll take however many years. So right now, their TV offering will look a lot like our TV Everywhere offering because of the internet delivery, rights issues that we have.
Yeah, I would say it's going to happen.
Yeah.
You need rights to do that, right? I mean, you can build the technology to deliver it. The internet is essentially another distribution platform. Does it change fundamentally some of the programmer bundling issues? Probably not, right? So someone from a technology perspective looking to deliver a service with a box through the web is still going to have to negotiate those contracts, and the economics are going to be fundamentally the same. So where's the difference? Maybe there's some savings on the CapEx that would have been used for the infrastructures. It's probably going to be on user experience, right? So if I can bundle OTT, back catalog the wealth of content from past seasons with live, with current content, and make it much more intuitive and smarter and package it with better advertising models, maybe that's the way to do it.
Here's the issue, one of the issues, one of the many issues.
There's many.
At home, I have Apple TVs, Roku TVs, they all deliver 1080p. I can get Netflix 1080p, right? If I want to see network, if I want to see the Olympics in 1080p, I can't. I can either get it 1080i or 720p. I actually get a better quality viewing experience, OTT, via one of these set-top boxes. I was actually surprised to learn today that NBC Sports doesn't even support set-top boxes. They can support one of these, or they can support an iPad or a computer. But when I asked the question about why don't set-top boxes show up in your breakout, we don't support them yet.
Well, but we will. We will. It's just
And you've got
it's
a
a
few
deal.
years left to work on the Olympics, I guess.
Just a few. I'll be retiring by the time they're over.
So,
But we will be there.
but in terms of the quality of viewing
Yeah.
experience, it's actually better today. And I actually believe that 4K will probably be delivered, well, it is already delivered via Netflix sooner than
Yeah.
via the cable.
I don't know if anybody else has the perspective on the panel. I would imagine that the older content, you've got time to encode it the way you want and deliver it the way you want. If it's live, then there's a whole set of infrastructure that's got to be spun up to deliver 1080p or 4K. But it'll get there. If there's a market for it, it'll be there.
I think you sort of made the point that the OTT players, the virtual MVPDs, whether they're successful in the launches or not, are pushing innovation and pushing the marketplace forward. Part of the reason we're having this conversation is because of some of the investments that they've made in creating an experience that is now being mirrored on some of the newer MVPD devices. So that to me is sort of the nice piece of this, is that you've got other entrants, new entrants into the market that are thinking about the business, and there's a bit of catch up perhaps on with some of the other established players, but they are creating an environment where there's more innovation. The overall experience will be beneficial.
Yeah.
And I was just going to add that I think the cycle will be the same cycle that we currently go through with the business. The question is, how quickly are you going to manage through that cycle, right? And I think that's the key. And the unfortunate part of it, it's actually a lot more complicated. It's a little bit more difficult. We all now have to support multiple devices, multiple platforms, multiple systems, and so that just adds additional complexity. So although the cycle might be faster, the technology may be more robust, it actually makes the business a lot more complicated to manage and operate.
And I would just add, that's a great point. I would just add that we lament where TV Everywhere is or isn't. Broadcast TV has been around for 50, 60 years, has time to mature as a technology and as a business model. Cable's been around for 30, 40 years. So where we are after, what was the term? When was it coined? 2009?
2009.
Not too
Give
bad.
us time.
Yeah.
Huh? Okay. Back in the back. You've been waiting.
Jennifer, to your point, you said HBO is relatively successful compared. You said HBO is relatively more successful compared to other content owners or podcasters when it comes to TV everywhere. So, from the content owner point of view, why do you think HBO is relatively successful compared to other? We are still. It's been like so many years. We are still trying to figure out whether it's a authentication problem, it's a syndication problem, it's a content right problem.
Yeah.
So before you answer from the content owner point of view, I'll just give you the end user point of view. The reason I think I'm more open to HBO and the reason I think it's more successful because I see them more like a content-driven company where they are not platform, they are like platform agnostic, not treating one screen as a primary screen compared to other screens. And so that's my point of view, but I would like to have your views. Why do you think that you're
So I guess Jennifer, for the panel, why is HBO winning?
Yeah.
I mean, aside from having a head start, I think it has to do with the fact that they have really made it a priority. They're able to go really deep on what they offer, right? So you're able to get a full offering on there where we, on the what I would call ad-supported network side, don't have that benefit from a rights perspective of being able to offer a content past the window that we've licensed. And so people have been sort of trained to, it was the only place, for the longest time, it was the only place to go to get those other seasons. We have been, for better or worse, promiscuous about where our content can go in terms of, other platforms. And I think there is something about the HBO subscriber that's a little more sophisticated as well, that understands kind of the proposition. They've done a great job of messaging it. That's what I've got. Sorry.
Anybody else admiring HBO?
I think it's easier. It's a little easier for a premium network to do it than the ad-supported nature of our business. The ads are so important, right? We are a dual stream model, and it makes everything more. We want to put it out there. We want to give the value, but we'd like to monetize it, and we can't because Nielsen doesn't measure. It adds a whole other layer of complexity as well.
Yeah, I would just add that the premium channel is a different bird, right? There's the customer knows that they're paying X dollars per month for that channel at the end. It's a discrete brand. A lot of these guys have multiple brands and multiple channels to kind of think through. And there's no ads involved, right? And if you think about HBO, I come from the cable industry. Folks raise their hand and say, I'm paying X dollars a month. 10, 15 years ago, I only have one channel of HBO. When I turn it on, there's nothing to watch. Then they added 3 or 4 channels, Digiplex. That gave more value. Then they put a lot of their content on demand on your set-top box. That adds more value. Now all that content is available on demand on all your devices. It's the same content, but it's available anytime. And so that 15, 18, 20 bucks a month that the customer sees as an item on their bill, they now derive more value out of it. And it's harder when you've got multiple brands, I would imagine. And it's probably harder when it's an ad model and if you don't have the rights to all your content.
Todd, Bloomberg modeling its approach on HBO?
I'd like to hope so. HBO, I think that's a very valid point. It's a premium-based network, and the premium networks tend to be out in front on these things because they have larger amounts of value to protect. And they have the revenue streams to make some investments. So, HBO, ESPN have been, I think, out in front in this space, and you're seeing people follow along. I think we've built a very good experience. We got great usage around it. We have a bit more of a global view to our applications as well. So, we don't have the rights issues strictly in the territory. We take a global approach to it. We're in 350 million homes around the world, so it's a slightly different way of approaching the business. But
TV everywhere working better elsewhere in the world than it is in the United States?
I don't think so. I think North America is largely leading this space.
We've got lots of questions here. I'll take one from the front.
Yeah, just a question for Jennifer. You mentioned that there's no segmented negotiation for TV everywhere rights when you go talk to distributors, but what's the best way to think about it if you didn't have TV everywhere rights in these negotiations? We're thinking about high single-digit growth rates and programming costs. Where do you think those rates would be if you weren't offering TV everywhere?
I couldn't even begin to speculate. I don't know. I'm sorry, I really don't know. They would be less, but I don't know. I mean, I really couldn't speculate. I'm sorry.
What do you think
what do I think the value of TV everywhere is?
Yeah.
I truly wouldn't. I can't venture a guess. I'm sorry. I really don't know. I don't know if anyone else does, but
Sir.
Yeah, so, especially for content providers and premium content providers, in the switch from TV to TV everywhere, as you defined it, there's been a need for a lot of infrastructure investment to be able to produce the streams and stream recipes, all that stuff to make your end users a better brand experience. Have these investments had their return on the initial investment? And if so, when do you see it finally catching up?
And has it really been that much of an investment? Is that fair to ask?
I think there is
go.
there is an investment. I mean, you have to put new technology in place. You have to put marketing in place. You have to just the process of working through those rights. That's an investment. So yes, there is an investment. Is there an ROI? I think these are early days. I think most people are out of the gate maybe 24 months, 36 months max. Some maybe just 12 months. So I think it's too early to tell. But I wouldn't look at this as one particular product line. It's the entire ecosystem, right? And it's just TV everywhere. What you once called TV has now expanded just to TV everywhere. And so we're just reinforcing that dual model, business. We're reinforcing the value of TV. Now it's just a matter of being able to deliver that experience to a consumer wherever they are, which they will demand, which they are demanding. And we have to do this. So even if you were to say, is there an ROI? The reality is the consumer's demanding it. We're going to have to meet the consumer at some point and deliver a product that they love and use.
Michael?
I can't speak to the over-the-top from the cloud-delivered sort of TV everywhere model. I would say that we work with pay TV operators to integrate our solutions into their set-top boxes, for example. So we look at things like usage, engagement, how many hours a month the end user uses that service. And we look at things like churn. In most cases, you're not charging the end user additional dollars for the service. So the ROI model is a little indirect, right? You're looking for other ways to calculate some sort of return. Churn is a good one, and then there's other sort of leading ones. I think once you layer in the advertising piece, you can probably add some dollars from that as well.
I remember when Jeff Bukes talked about this, he talked about the value to investment split. So the value of TV everywhere being very high compared to the level of investment being relatively low, on top of all the other things you're investing in order to create the content. Is there another question?
I sort of argue that the inconsistency of experience is one of the big things that you guys need to address. What your experience is with TV everywhere varies not only by the different content providers, but also by the cable and people who are actually delivering it. So the question is, one, do you think that is the case? Two, when do you think that there will be more consistency across the experience? And then three, whose job is it really to let consumers know what TV everywhere means, because it means different things to so many people, right?
So this was a point on the last panel, is this issue of user experience, and that for some of these services, the user experience is still poor. How can we address that? Do we need user experience courses for everybody involved, or is it what's got to happen?
I mean, I think that a user experience is, to your question about sort of uniformity across the devices. I think the authentication layer would make sense to have that an easier point of access. But I would leave it up to the programmers to create an experience that makes sense for their audience. I think different programmers, different content providers have a different kind of audience that would demand different aspects of the experience. Perhaps more social integration, more linear, more lean back, more behind the scenes. So I don't think you necessarily would want a uniform experience across all the programmer platforms.
My question was more of what people will expect to be able to do as opposed to everyone having the same. It was more of a consistency. Right now, with some content companies and with some cable companies, you only have access to their content with your own home on the same network. Other ones allow you to do it elsewhere.
Yeah.
So it still really seems like, and obviously you're still new on the curve in terms of introducing this, but I just think people don't really understand what TV everywhere means at this point.
Yeah.
Whose job is it really to let them know what it means and what it's actually going to deliver?
And there are some industry initiatives to try to work through this, but what do you think, Michael?
Well, there's a lot of questions in that one question. I think one is, maybe one answer to one of those questions is, it comes down to content rights. So one distributor might have a different set of content rights for content inside the home, outside the home, or other things you can do with it on what device here and there. So that governs some of that. The other thing I would say is that some of this is who owns the consumer experience. If I own the content, I've got a vested interest in how that content is presented to the end user. So you can make a case that even though the distributor is further down the value chain, the content owner wants to preserve their ownership of that experience and that customer to some extent. So there's a little bit of that, I think, that goes on there as well. So, and then maybe the third thing is, maybe it's not so bad that you have different experiences. I mean, I think it's probably a little frustrating to the consumer, but there's probably a shakeout period as to what's the better experience, what have you. But there's a lot of experimentation going on, and that's actually a good thing. So setting aside the rights issues, how you deliver that experience, maybe it's better that there's more experiences and more competition in the marketplace.
Another question? Yes, sir.
You say TV everywhere, but it's really only North America based. Because globally, it doesn't mean that. So when do you see people start to see that it's starting to be everywhere?
So do you mean so that a U.S. cable subscriber could take it with them?
Yes.
Those rights, from a rights perspective, I don't see a path with my deals. To be frank with you, I don't see that happening. I think it's anywhere in the U.S. I don't know if you guys see it. Well, yours is different.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to own our rights globally, so the experience with Bloomberg can travel outside the United States, but the vast majority of the programmers, not to speak for them, but I think the content owner then ultimately resells the rights in different territories, and you get into a world of territorial rights.
Yep.
So I'm going to take one last question from the audience. Got one more? Anybody left? Yes, sir.
How important is the app experience, the television application experience, versus just a dumb glass presentation? In other words, if you had an OTT MVPD who's basically delivering what people are accustomed to in linear television, just a viewer, versus how important is it for you to have a deeper experience with your own application from your network?
Versus the aggregated experience, you mean?
Versus just a common display.
I think it's important for us in terms of reaching the superfan, right? So I don't think that I don't think that we try to kid ourselves at NBC that the vast majority of folks are going to pop from app to app, program app to program app to watch TV in the long run. But if they are a diehard Suits fan or they really love the NHL and they want to watch everything on NBC Sportsnet, I think that's where they'll go to get a deeper, richer experience with additional information besides just the video. So for us, it's about the superfan.
Anybody else?
I would say just that the app experience is very important. We build the app experiences for Dish and Dish's TV Everywhere. And when we first deployed the app, our ratings on iTunes weren't that great. Now they're 4.5 stars. And what we've seen is that engagement climbs with the quality of the experience. There's a strong correlation between the two. You make a better app, you make a better experience, people stay there longer because they can find what they want to watch. I think the second thing I would say is, and this kind of gets to the challenge of TV Everywhere in general, is we see this fractured world where every programmer has a different app, and that's tough, right? So if I've got to go there and log in with this credential, that credential, the authentication piece is one piece, but the separation of apps is tough. And so if somebody asked a question about, is there any uniformity? It's good to have different voices and different ways of thinking about these experiences, and the better ones rise to the top. But at the end of the day, if customers paying for access to a whole bunch of content, how do you answer that question for them easily? What should I watch now? When you have 15 apps, it's hard to figure that out.
Okay, we've run out of time. I just want to ask our audience, those of you who came in and sort of said you had a more technical understanding of TV Everywhere than a commercial one, do you have a better understanding of the complexities of the commercial situation now? Yes? Good, then I think this panel is a success.
There's only two hands.
If you still have questions, if you're still impatient, if you still have user experience tips for the panel, find them afterwards. Otherwise, enjoy your lunch, and thanks to our panelists.